Welcome everyone to our webinar on digital transformation for private foundations. We're going to have Brenda Kalar and Marlena Wong talk about Marlena's experience over at Koret Foundation. And with that, I'll kick it over to you ladies.
Thank you. So Marlena, just to get started here today, can you tell us a little about who Koret is, what your mission, and your role here at the foundation?
Sure. We're a private foundation based in San Francisco. We're about a $500 million foundation, and what we are is we're predominantly a Jewish foundation, and we're committed to strengthening the Bay Area community and nurturing the continuation of the Jewish people worldwide.
Awesome. And what is your role here at Koret? Because I know you're more than just the CFO.
I am the CFO here at Koret, and aside from just the day-to-day accounting work and the finance work, I also oversee the operations, the IT, the HR, and I also do the financial grant evaluation at Koret.
So never a dull moment, right?
Never.
Awesome. So today we wanted to really talk about Koret's digital transformation and the things that prompted your need for a digital transformation. Because when you joined, I think you had told me that everybody was still using paper. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, sure. So when I first came to Koret Foundation, that was about 5 years ago, we had really antiquated processes. So, everything was done on paper. We had a really lengthy close. It was about 30 to 45 days. Our average finance staff was employed here for about 15, the average years they were employed at Koret were 15 years. So they were used to the routine, they liked processing, and they had no interest in changing. The other thing was our program team and the finance team did not have a good relationship with one another. And the old system that we did use was called Microsoft Dynamic FL, and it was implemented in 1996. So if you can imagine, that's 20 years ago. And within that system, we had an old chart of account. And as the foundation was growing, it got more complex over time. New accounts just kept adding on. So there were duplicate accounts, duplicate vendors. And so there's nobody that really ultimately owned the system. And it was really difficult to actually see because it was so antiquated, it was so difficult to see where the mistakes are in the system without pulling the data out on paper and then looking at it again. So hence that's why, we needed that and, having that as needed to get a new system as a foundation.
Yeah, I bet that's something that a lot of our private foundation clients can resonate with, that you've got a staff that's been here forever, that, I think everybody loves everything except for change, because change means their jobs are going to change. And so you decided that you were going to implement a whole bunch of new systems and really update all of your processes and procedures, and hopefully with the end goal to improve communication and processing between programs and finance and make that a cohesive team. So how did you start on your digital transformation? What was the first
step in doing it?
Yeah.
That was quite easy. I think when I first came on, I already had buy-in from our board and our CEO. And when I first came on, that was the first thing I asked for was, we need a new accounting system. And they did not push back. They were more than happy to support that, given the fact that I provided them with that was, they asked me what do you see in this foundation that we can improve? And I basically said, we need to improve.
You were honest.
And so, that they've been supported from day one. So I felt that the leadership was really on top of in that sense.
And that's great, because you must have made a really great case to your board for why digital transformation was necessary. What were some of the challenges that the organization was going through that prompted, that made it so easy for the board to say, yes, we agree?
I think one of the things was, the CFO, we had a CFO that was, about to retire. I think also the fact that I reported back to them and basically they knew, and I was being really honest about it. And also the fact that I think part of it is, having a system in place really reduces the risk of the foundation. We had a person that was solely hired here to do AP, and that was their full-time job. And given the amount of AP, given the amount of invoices we had, it was not necessary to have a full-time staff for that. So, when I was here my first year, it was really just assessing, evaluating, and kind of reporting back to them. And and that was something I was just really focused on. And the other thing I think that was in my favor was that I always felt that I had great partnerships with our board and our CEO. And I think creating that partnership and that collaboration was really important. And I also had some buy-in from some of the program staff as well. I think from day one, I really, try to find partnerships and people that I go, hey, this is what I really want to do is put in a new system. I think that would really help all of us transform and that we all benefit from having a new system.
Definitely. And when thinking about, sometimes it's, the buzzword today is called technology stack.
Yeah.
Think about your technology stack, but think about all of the different programs and systems that you use to do your day-to-day job. And I work with our strategy and transformation group doing assessments with organizations that are, right in that position. They know they need a whole bunch of things, but don't know what.
Yeah.
And the first step is taking an inventory of what you have. And usually people start, they've got their email, their financial system, their grants management. And then when they start talking to people, they realize that people have gone and bought all kinds of other software. And that, when you're really thinking about reevaluating your entire technology landscape, you have to start with the ERP.
Yeah.
Because that's the backbone of everything. And that's what you ultimately need to do financial reporting out of. And so you quickly came to that conclusion yourself. What were some of the considerations that went into picking an ERP system for a foundation?
What we were looking for is really a system that was heavily invested in the nonprofit world. I think the nonprofit world itself has its own language, its own lingo, and just its own their own culture. I think.
Yeah.
And I think we're also looking at just like I want to create long-term partnership with our board and our CEO. It's also what I'm looking for is also partnership with the system I'm choosing, because ultimately, even though this is a system, it's also a long-term partnership, because behind these systems are also people. So that's really important to have that collaboration. I was also looking for a community, somebody that even though we have the system, I wanted a community that I can actually, an open community where if I had questions, who I can go to and who is also using it. And when we were doing our search, I found that during our interviews with the various vendors, when we did do our ERP, we really spoke to so many. I mean, we spent probably 4 months speaking to various vendors.
How many ERPs did you start with?
We started with 6.
Okay.
And then we ended with 2.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what were your final 2 there?
It was NetSuite and Intact.
And what made those 2 kind of stand out from the competition?
Well, they were mid-market accounting system, and those are 2 that really fit into what we needed. We didn't need something like a huge system like that, like
Oracle.
Yeah, exactly. We needed something for the mid-market, and those 2 really it came down to those 2 that really fit. And we also heard that other nonprofits and private foundations were down to these 2 as well.
Okay. And which did you ultimately choose?
Intact.
Okay, and what made you choose Intact over?
I think for various reasons. I think with Intact, they really they were very committed to their nonprofit customers. They have about 30% of their clients are nonprofit customers, and that's something that they're very proud of. And I think when you have a system that really commits to that and they stand behind that, you know that what they're doing is putting like research and development costs into the system for nonprofit. I think the other thing was that we hired Marlena as our implementation team as well, and we really liked the model that Marlena brought in. I think at that time NetSuite was using their internal consultants. So for each piece, it was like, oh, if you were going to implement the asset, or if you were going to implement the expenses, it's each they had various consultants.
And so different teams for each module.
Different team for each module, and I just felt like how then you can't see the bigger picture of it. Where Marlena, we had one lead consultant, and they also had their CPA, so they understand like all the ramifications. And they were forward thinking in that sense of like knowing like, you know, what they were doing. And on top of it, I think Marlena had a lot of experience in implementing, you know, Intact. And I didn't feel that it was the same for NetSuite. And also when we started interviewing the various like people who use NetSuite and Intact, you know, the clients that use Intact were very much like, you know, we love Intact. They never questioned it. And so I really felt that it really spoke to what it was. And when we went through the process of Intact, the sales piece of it, I never felt that Intact pushed us in any way. They always came back. They were very patient, and they said, you know, if you need any more clients, we will, you know, provide you with more clients that can talk about their experience in Intact as well. So,
awesome.
Yeah, culturally they were aligned with who we were.
And that sounds like it really speaks to your need for that partnership with your technology provider. One of the things we haven't talked about yet is integration.
Yeah.
Because, of course, we said that the ERP is the backbone.
Yeah.
That means there's all kinds of other things integrating into it. So how did integration options and that selection process kind of play into your ERP selection? And then second question, what integrations are you using today?
Okay. So I think I'll answer the integration that we have now. So, you know, we also implemented an expense management system called Nexonia that is a native integration into our Intact system. And that's been like a godsend for us because we don't have to do a journal entry and enter any expenses. It literally feeds in, and that has cut our costs, I think, just time and cost like by half of what we originally were doing when we had to review an expense like report. We have Payment Manager that we do ACH in, which has been like great to use. It's great to have as well. And I think we are in the process now of implementing a new grant management system called Flux, and we also are getting that integrated and using Marlena to integrate that into our purchasing module in Intact as well.
Excellent. And I know for me, I was a client of Marlena before I came back to public accounting here. And I had estimated the same thing, that my AP person was spending approximately 60% of their time on entering in expense reports. Between validating them, making sure we had the right, you know, receipts, that it was coded correctly, that we had all the signatures. It takes a lot of time to do that full audit, especially when I worked for an international nonprofit that had people traveling all over the world, you know, any given week. And so it was a lot of time suck. How have you been able to reduce the amount of time that it takes, like how much time, and how have you been able to streamline your staffing as a result?
Oh, that's been that's a really good question, because now I feel like we have like a 10-day close. We're all pretty much paperless. We have the ability to actually, you know, if a person is in the office and they want to work from home or traveling, you could actually, you know, approve payments through that. And like, you know, and we're able to communicate also internally, you know, with our program team as well. And so it's been like really, morale's been up. Our team, you know, we used to be a 16-person team, and now we're down to 10. And that part of that reason is that we have outsourced partially our financial function, and that's just been great because it's reduced our risk as well. We have a company called Strata that does our close and our processing, and so that saves us on, again, costs, but also has allowed the team internally here to focus on really, you know, the other aspect of, you know, what the finance team oversee, which is HR, IT, you know, operations, and to work closely with our grants team as well. And given the fact that we have this implementation going on, you know, my team, we're in these meetings with them. We're not in all of them, but the things that impact finance as well. So it's been a really, like, you know, great. And also we've been able to hire people that are all about, you know, we want these changes, we want to, like, you know, utilize technology, but at the same time be able to see the bigger picture and look at, you know, and say, oh, you know, what's the risk factor in that as well. So all in all, like, I could go on and on about, like, some of the changes, like, and, you know, I you know, with you, Brenda, I've been telling you some of the changes. I mean, even our board they've been so happy because they go, we get reports that are, you know, the most up-to-date reports. And I'm able to do that, like, do the most up-to-date reports because we have, like, a system like Intact. I don't have to really worry about that. I think when I first came on, I used to worry about, like, is the number that we're producing correct? Is it not? I could easily see that, and I could easily see if there's mistakes or not in Intact. The other thing is we've been able to move our audit up as well, and we're able to do our 990s and our audit at the same time, so relatively present them, like, almost around the same time for our board, and that's been a huge change.
Yeah. Definitely a big change from what we see.
Yeah, and I mean, I think recently even the budget, I mean, we're able to have this conversation about the budget way in advance. When I first came on, the first year I came on, it took like 2 months to do a budget, and I'm like, there's no way this should take 2 months. It literally should. The conversations between the departments and all should take about a month.
But to actually put it together
should not take like 2 months to do. And, you know, and people had their, like, you know, literally we're running around trying to figure out a budget. And right now, like, the budget is one of the smoothest things that we do. I mean, I literally, by the end of Q3, I'm having these conversations with, you know, our program team and our CEO, and just be able to talk about planning in a very proactive way as opposed to a reactive way. So I feel that our foundation is very proactive, and we're thinking things through, and we're allowed to actually think, you know, plan ahead and not be so reactive.
So it sounds like from a cultural standpoint that it's really changed the role and the position of finance within the organization. That now that data is a commodity. You can now, instead of creating data, you can do that more to drive analytics and to produce that data into information that you can then use to make management, planning, and budgeting considerations as well. So it sounds like it's also really changed the type of staff that you're hiring for.
Yes, we are. The staff that we have now, they're thinking bigger picture, and I think it's not just like they're thinking of, like, how do I process this? They're thinking about, hey, how do I make this, like, easier? How do I, like, you know, be more effective in the process? Or is this process needed? And I think when you're going through a system implementation, it's not just about, putting all the numbers inside a system. It's really about rethinking your process and rethinking, like, should we keep these antiquated processes, and you know, and rethinking your process, and that takes a very different skill set and a different staff than, you know, a staff that's used to processing and is used to doing the same thing over and over. It takes a dynamic staff, and it takes a staff that really is about collaboration and working together and transparency. And we do have a culture here, and you know, when we do hire now, the culture that we have is really, like, all about, are you a team player? You know, are you willing to, you know, look at antiquated process? Are you willing to not just, like, implement a system in place and say, oh, we're done with that. But like every year we look at it and say, wow, what is like other people doing that's best industry practice? What are we doing to lead that? And, and I think as a foundation, we want to be able to lead in that conversation with other foundations and other nonprofits to say, hey, you guys as a finance team, you don't have to be a martyr. Like it's a very powerful position to be in, to see a company from a 360-degree angle and know, like, to help others as well, to help, the program staff, and they can help us. And it's a very, I come to work every day going, wow, we have such an amazing staff because of the changes that we've been able to implement and make and talk through with each other.
That's really exciting.
Yeah.
And I think, one of the things that you spoke to at the beginning was that, when you first started, that program and finance were kind of at odds with each other, that it wasn't an easy relationship.
Mm-hmm.
How has the digital transformation that you've done here improved that relationship between programs and finance?
I think when I first came on, I think there was a lot of there wasn't a lot of trust with both teams.
Numbers were wrong.
Numbers were either nobody trusts the numbers, or I was told by the program staff that the finance team would not provide the numbers. And so there was not transparency, and because there wasn't that transparency, both teams couldn't trust one another, but not only that, but plan ahead with one another and have a conversation of, what's our budget for this? Like, how much are we spending? Like, how much have we already spent? And we're all so busy now that we actually have to kind of, talk to one another consistently. And so I think now it's just very different. Like the teams, we trust each other, and we there's not a blame game. It's like, hey, we're trying to help each other out. Like, let's get to the right number, the right information. And so I think that's really changed us, and that's allowed us to be as effective as we are with 10 people. I would say, we're very small, but we're very mighty in that sense, because we're able to do that with technology.
And you also mentioned that you are in the middle of implementing a new grant management system. And so that's very program facing. And so they probably feel like now it's finally their time.
Yeah.
And what is the role that the finance team is playing on that new grants management system implementation?
I think we're all going to eventually be on that. What we're implementing is Flux right now, and we're all going to be on it. And so if there's information we need, collaboration with their team, we all have access to the information. And I think the integration that we're doing is really on the grant payment piece of it with Intact. And we're working with our Menino on that currently.
Right, and that's to make sure, because you do multi-year and several different payment tranches, and so you want to have that, potential conditional liability in some cases, knowing all of those rules just changed in the last year. You get conditional and unconditional grants. Private foundations generally give mostly conditional, because if they're not meeting the requirements, you're not going to continue to fund them. But still, as a finance team, you want to track that for cash flow planning, investment purposes. And so having that potential conditional liability on there in your purchasing module that can then be converted into an AP bill when the program team gives the AOK for the next payment, that's so important, because your staff, like you said, you don't have staff that are transactional anymore. You've mostly outsourced that transactional component to it. So now it's really, running the business and running those programs and having your team work with the programs team to get that information, and making sure that those dimensions, those accounts, the customer name, all of that is the same in both systems. Because I think one of the biggest difficulties, I think, for nonprofits especially and private foundations, I think, within that sub-niche, have trouble with data silos, where finance is doing their own thing, programs is doing their own thing, and they only talk when you need something from one another. So for finance, that's at month end, and for programs, that's when you need a check cut. But there's very little collaboration or communication otherwise. It sounds like you're finding that you guys are talking a lot more.
We are. I think some of the things that has helped is that, I've worked closely with our director of programs, and, we've really, put out like what are the staff's needs upon it. One of the things that we've been very lucky to do is, and we recently did that, was like a staff day, and that's really visiting our grantee, and that's really helped us understand our grantee and just not look at it just on a business perspective, but like what they're doing and, what Koret funds, and like we see like what Koret has funded, as well. And so that gives us a chance to get out of the office and to actually, get to know one another. Aside from just the work that we do, we're so busy with we've been, I feel like we've been just integrating like systems after systems after system, and that's just a really tiring thing on top of the job that we do currently have, right? And at time, and what we have done is we've actually, again, like partner with like great consulting firms. I mean, we're using a great consulting firm for our Flux implementation called Duende. And, that is really, I give credit to our program team and the fact that we like all sat through like who is best for us. And because we created a culture of what we want, our long-term partnerships and collaboration and the continual collaboration with these consultants going forward, it's really helped us. And we've gone through it. Because of that, our integrations have been smooth because of having great partnerships.
Awesome. So let's talk about your vision for the future. What's next for Koret?
I think, what we do, what I get excited about is like every year, like we have an INTAC conference, as you know, Brenda, you're there and I see you there. And I get really excited about that because when we come back, it's like, what are the things that we're looking at, And so this year, what we're gonna be looking at is like AP automation. We're looking to see if we could get a new HR system because some of the HR systems, our current HR system doesn't integrate with Intact, So we're looking at an HR system that can automate onboard hiring, We're also looking at building dashboards as another thing, and also the budgeting and forecasting as well. So those are the kind of the top things that we're looking at. And again, this is, what I want to say is, just because you implement a system, it's not just like it stops there. You're always constantly looking at like ways to make it better and like how to improve, your system, but also how to like reduce risk and like to allow your staff to actually move up and like start looking at the bigger picture and giving them a say of like, hey, what are some of the things we can also do and what are some of the things that we should look at risk, because cybersecurity is really big now because everything's on the cloud. And so it's allowing us to look at a company in a very different way than just an accounting system.
And I think that's an important call out, and you're never done.
Yeah.
Is that it's not like the old on-prem software where you implement it and then somebody comes in to do an upgrade in a few years. And then every few years after that until someday you realize nobody's been in a while and you're 4 releases behind and no wonder the technology is no longer working for you. So with most of these technologies, all of them that you've implemented are cloud-based and they're pushing updates on a continuous basis or on a schedule. Most of them have scheduled release dates throughout the year. And so you're constantly getting these new features. From an internal control standpoint, how do you manage, adding in new features and improving the systems, and just making sure that you're always keeping up with the new technology?
That's a really good question. I think it's collaboration, it's partnership. I know that I'm constantly repeating myself in that, but it's really important to have that collaboration and partnership, because that's how you're able to communicate to one another. So, when we are doing, for example, when we're doing our grant management system, a lot of that system and the processes are really like antiquated. So it's really, taking a step back and like talking it through to one another. But then also after talking it through, documenting, and also like bringing in our auditors. We don't bring we have a constant communication line with our auditors. We don't want to tell our auditors like, hey, guess what? All the things we've changed at year end, and we're going to surprise you. And as a person who is an ex-auditor, and you as well, as both of us are from PwC, we do not like surprises as auditors,
Definitely not.
And so it's a courtesy to give the auditors a heads up before year end, and actually talk to them, like, is there anything that you see that, we are thinking about the process, and this is how we document, and this is like the internal controls we feel that are in place. However, if you have anything to add, please let us know. And again, it's partnership, it's collaboration, it's that communication, it's that constant communication.
That's so funny. I remember back in the day when I was an auditor, I'd be reviewing these like new, complicated, weird grant agreements and thinking to myself, why didn't they call us when they were putting this together? Like, we could have actually given them advice to get the treatment they thought they were getting by the way this was worded, but because you have, for example, a right of return, this is now conditional instead of unconditional, and that was not your intention, but that's the way the contract is written. And so I definitely agree with you that when you view your auditors and your technologists as partners, it changes that conversation, and it changes the level of questions that you're able to talk to and collaborate on.
Mm-hmm.
So do you have any obviously we've got some new implementations that we're doing, but do you have any specific goals for the future for your team, for Koret, for your technology?
I feel like, we're pretty much, we've reached a lot of our goals and stuff, and I feel like the goals always get pushed out, right? Because, every year you have a new goal to say, how do we improve this? What do we want to do next? How do we want to work together to put a new module in place, or a new, system, like, another system to integrate in place. And I think our goal is to just like continue to really be like, our goal is really just to like be a good foundation and to really, serve our grantees in that sense. And so, given the fact that we're able to stay within our budget with all these changes, like I'm really proud of like our foundation to be able to do that and be able to make the grants that we make.
Awesome.
Because of it.
So it sounds like you've done the heavy lifting at this point.
Yes.
And it took about 3 years
You did.
to do, and maybe 4 total once you finish with the grants management system. So it's not a quick process to do the whole, to change over all of your systems, move everything to the cloud, streamline, and collaborate. It's not something you can do in a 1 year.
Yeah. So I one of the advice that my CEO always says is Rome was not built in a day. And when I first came on, I wanted just like, let me do all this at once, and and I think that was just a really good advice that he provided me. So then we can actually gave me permission to really slow down, and it gave me permission to actually take my time and how to do it. It's better to like execute right than like to have, you've done all this work and then the execution comes out and it's like not what you expected it to be.
And that's why you waited 2 years. You were here for 2 years before you started changing anything, because you really wanted to dig in and learn, what the foundation was doing, what their issues were, who the players were, and really hear that out, and then embark on that. On a change.
Yeah, and I think also like when you have staff who who's been here for 15 years who didn't want change. It takes time to really give them a chance to either they're going to step into joining you into that integration, or it's actually, it doesn't work, and where you're going to have that conversations like, I think, you know, like, this partnership is not working.
Right.
And to really kind of say, you know, I think, you know, this is not where we are going culturally.
Yeah.
And so that does take time, because you don't want to actually implement when, like, you don't have the right staff in place, because then, you know, you'll actually make more mistakes, and, you know, not having the right staff, they don't know how to even guide you back or manage you, or, you know, vice versa as well. So I think one of the things that I always hear from people is that they have a tendency to implement way ahead before putting in the right staff or the right people and the right partnership and the right consulting firm before they implement. And so we did spend longer than we should have, but I felt that was like a better way to go about it. And now, I mean, I never, you know, you hear me say it, there's just no regrets of like spending that time to do it correctly.
And I've done a lot of system implementations over my time, and you know, one of the things that, you know, when I was doing my reference calls, that, you know, one of the questions I always asked was, you know, if you could do anything differently, what would you do? And the one thing that they always said was, I would have spent more time planning.
Mm-hmm.
Every single one of them. And I'm like, wow, because they all just said, okay, we're doing this, now we're doing this.
Yeah.
Like, and suddenly it's happening.
Yeah.
But, you know, spending that time and being real deliberate, you know, we call this a digital transformation webinar, but it sounds like it's really transformed your whole organization.
Mm-hmm.
And that it's not just a digital transformation, that it's been a staffing transformation, a cultural transformation, and just in general, a collaboration with your various partners there. But I'm still going to ask you that question. From all of your implementations that you did, you know, over the course of your digital transformation, is there anything you do differently?
Yes, I think one of it was, you know, probably spending more time with the staff that weren't decision makers. I think one of the things is, you know, there were a lot of staff that were like a bit nervous around like having a new accounting system on the program side, and so I think in hindsight, even though it didn't affect them, the accounting system, that I would have had more meetings with them, because they were just so nervous about the change, even though it had no impact on them. But then I think what they were afraid of is there an impact on me?
The unknown.
The unknown. And like keeping them more afloat in it. You know, I spent a lot of time with our board, with our CEO, with like the decision maker in the foundations, like with our director of program. I think I spent more time with them and not really like the next tier of people who were not decision makers.
Interesting. And I think, especially given how small your organization is, that everybody knew about this. And everybody knew it was happening and worried that it was going to eliminate their job or change their job completely or make them work with so-and-so over there that they didn't want to.
Exactly. And I think, you know, from that lesson, what I learned was like, after we did implement and we decided that we want to outsource, we really brought that in. Like, we had like every person in our foundation meet our outsource team and like to have any question they have. So it's all out on the table, regardless of how it was. Like, we are going to be doing this. This is why we're doing this, and giving them an opportunity to even to say what they have to say, whether it's positive, whether it's negative, to give people that chance to say what, you know, to have an opinion, to really get their worries out. And I think a lot of times that we don't want to address the elephant in the room. And you know, through like all this transformation, I actually, you know, I'm more comfortable with like, you know, saying, let's just get the elephant out of the room and just have it out there, you know, because it's a lot easier to deal with when you like address the elephant in the room instead of ignoring it, because eventually you're going to have to address it and it's not going to be as pleasant, I think, later.
And the further you go down the path, the harder it is to correct, a design, something that needs to be designed differently because of a process or a scenario or a use case that your organization has.
Exactly.
So definitely good to talk about all those elephants, pink or not.
Exactly. Or flying or not flying.
Is there anything else that you would do differently?
No, I think that's a big one. I think, through all this process, I realized that partnership communication, is the biggest, you could put the best system in place, but without partnership, without collaboration, without constant communication, because behind, like I said, behind every system are people, and if people are not using it and not having ownership of it and not being powerful around it, you could have the best chart of accounts, you can have the best, how it's designed, but if people aren't buying into that design and people aren't buying into it, you essentially, you don't have a good execution. It actually, helps to have, constantly have that mindset of that you are in partnership. And I think sometimes people are afraid that they can't talk to their board, or they don't want to tell their CEO that just the truth, But I think, again, it's addressing the elephant in the room and really saying, giving them that, hey, you have a solution for this. And again, they are your partner. And, I've always had that coming in from day one, is that I knew that the leadership of Koret, really wanted that partnership with me as well.
You always felt that they had your back, right?
Yes.
So I think what you said there is really important. And working with our strategy and transformation group, we always look at the 3 pillars. So we're talking about technology today, but we can't talk about it in a vacuum, because there's the people, and then there's the processes that get things into a system. And sometimes you've got to find a system that matches the processes. And then sometimes, like you said, you've got to take a look at those processes and say, are they out of date? Are they antiquated? Do they need to be done? I had a mentor once explain this to me, call it something a ham bone. And I was like, oh, I don't understand what you mean. And so he told me a story of how a husband and a wife, husband got, a ham from his company, for the holidays. And she got the ham, and the first thing she did was cut 3 inches off of either end. And he's like, well, that's a lot of meat to waste. Why do you do it that way? And she's like, I don't know. My grandmother's recipe starts and it says you cut 3 inches off each end. So it's what I do. And he's like, well, that seems like an awful waste. Why? So she asked her mom, and her mom didn't know. And so she asked her grandmother, and her grandmother said, oh, when we first got married, we had a tiny oven. And so I had to cut the ham to fit into the oven. And so they had this process and this recipe that made them cut off 3 inches on either side and waste all of that because somebody, when they wrote that recipe, when they wrote that process, had a different set of tools. And so I think it's really important when looking at a new set of tools to question those processes and then to go find out, do you have a ham bone on your hands? Or is this a process that somebody created to work around a system that didn't do what it needed to do? And now that you have a system that does do it, can you update that process? Does it need to be done? Because I think when we're talking about data transformation, a lot of times is eliminating that transactional, that no value add of downloading from one system and uploading into another, or worse, retyping it into another system. Human error, there's always, a transposition risk, or that something's going to be lost in translation, missed, or duplicated. And so having that integration really helps kind of streamline all of those different types of processes. And then one last question for today. How has the way that you've integrated all of your technologies and the transformation that you've done internally here, how has that affected and benefited the community that you're trying to serve?
That's a really good question. I think the way it's benefited us internally. I think it's also benefited us externally, because I also am part of the Bay Area Foundation group, and it's allowed me to actually not just focus on the accounting and the finance and be a martyr, but really to look at our whole company through like operations, through HR, through IT, through whatever the business of the foundation is, and to be, forward thinking, and to say, hey, what are some things we should look at next, and also, I think when I do attend conferences, other nonprofits or other foundations ask me all the time. They're like, we wish that we had people like that we could collaborate with. And I think, we have to look at, people do want, our natural instinct is that we do want to collaborate. We want to make our lives easier. And I think, what happens a lot of times when the systems are, like when there aren't good systems, there is a lot of mistrust that gets, developed internally. Yeah. But I think, we as people need to really take a step back and know that, other people want to help us, and, our team members want to help us, and that overall, everybody wants to collaborate and be partnerships and stuff. It makes, I come to work, and I think, and I could, I'll speak, I'm very confident that our staff feels the same way, that all of us like love coming into work, because, we are so collaborative, and we, get along with one another, and we like working with one another. And it's just been like so much like fun, and like, and not to take yourself so serious about it. And like that this process is not like it, because you have good like consultants, like they really help you to make this fun, and like even though you have to make thousands and thousands and thousands of decisions, like it is a fun process. And and I think our grantees benefit from that as well.
From you having more access to timely information.
Exactly.
And happier program staff for working with finance. Absolutely. I would definitely agree with that. Is there anything else that you'd like to add that we didn't talk about today?
No. I think you said it. Like we've been very thorough about this as well.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate you taking the time to chat with us. Once again, we've been chatting with Marlena Wong, the CFO of the Koret Foundation, and I'm Brenda Kaler.
Thank you.